So the rightoids have found a country song with political lyrics to coalesce around. No, not that one. That was from a previous news cycle. I'm talking about Rich Men North of Richmond. The song is a redneck working-class American creed, and every leftoid who listens to it has a very turbulent reaction. The first half of it is something that any socialist can get behind.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away. 'Cause your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men,
Whenever I've watched a crumb tuber react to this song, they're actually initially into it, but all of their faces sour when they hear the second half.
Wish politicians would look out for miners, and not just miners on an island somewhere. Lord, we got folks in the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. Well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds.
This is the wrong type of populism for your average socialist. Yeah, some of them are still trying to claim this song as the soul of the proletariat or whatever, but most of them have moved on to decry it as a right-wing AstroTurf job. What's really telling is that they vehemently object to the Epstein's Island reference, even though there's a fair bit of evidence regarding Epstein's behaviors on that island. It's always going to be funny to me that socialists believe the world is secretly controlled by the 1% who use their capital to circumvent laws and destroy nations, that modern democracy is a sham meant to post hoc justify the ruling class's existence. All of that populist brain rot shit. But the minute a Nazi walks in and asks about the genetics of the people involved, suddenly now it's a dangerous conspiracy theory. They're all fucking retarded. Anyway, the legacy media is all over this guy, talking about how the far right loves him and how his anti-government rhetoric is dangerous and everything else. Here's the thing, the people writing these articles are the same people demanding their student loans be forgiven. Meanwhile, you think guys like this even have a student loan? This is something I pointed out in my Bidenomics video. If you print money and give it to the middle class, the resulting inflation is an informal tax of that value on anybody who didn't receive the printed money. The rich might not care, but the poor certainly do. If forgiving the middle class's student loans causes inflation, and it might, then it's the poor people who suffer as the spending power of whatever savings they might have plummets. Here's the thing about viral phenomenon. This applies to positive trends, like a song taking off, but it also applies to negative trends, like a consumer boycott. Generally, when things go viral online, it's more common that it begins in a leftist circle than a rightist one. This is self-evident to me. The internet is a younger technology, used overwhelmingly by young people. Young people are more likely to be leftists and more likely to have the free time to spend online engaging in viral events. But when something goes viral out of a rightist circle, it's almost immediately attacked as not truly being viral, instead as being astroturfed by the elites or something. For example, look at the mainstream response to the Bud Light boycott. Bud Light's audience was predominantly right-wingers. Bud Light pisses right-wingers off. Right-wingers stop drinking it. It's a pretty simple story to understand. But the leftist narrative surrounding that event is that it's not a true consumer boycott. It's not actually people rising up and voting with their wallet and having their voice heard. It's that rightoids are mindless sheep directed by Matt Walsh or Tucker Carlson or whoever else. It's not a true viral event. It's astroturfed by rightist talking heads. Hey, when I talked about it last, I didn't say it was fake or anything, I just thought it was dumb. But leftoids cannot tolerate the idea of a mass action movement from a decentralized group of lowly plebs that isn't in service of leftist politics. This explains their reaction to Bud Light, it explains their reaction to the Canadian trucker protest, it explains their reaction to the various farmer protests. They cannot accept the idea of ground roots working class action that goes against their ideas. The reason for this is because even as socialists talk about advocating for the working class, they actually hate the working class. They find them intolerable. It's that Stone-Tossed comic, where the communist refuses to shake the dirty hands of the working class man. The American working class, living in the countryside, working with their hands or with large machinery, is from a different culture and holds different values than the American communist, who lives in a pod in a large city and contributes little of actual material value to society. I've spoken about these people so many times on my channel. The ivory tower intellectuals, the champagne socialists, the mindless progressives who believe that shaming other people is an argument, the government officials who work to dismantle the lives of the very same people who feed them in the pursuit of their utopia, knowing that they will have more than enough influence to survive the famine they're creating. We've all seen the posts of middle-class, middle-aged white women who force their Mexican maids to vote Democrat or fire them. We've all seen the Reddit addicts and the Twitterati talk about how classism is good because the working class is bigoted, conservative, stoic, and likes edgy jokes. And we've all seen angry progs scream racial slurs at non-white Republican voters.
If their parents racist, that baby racist. Fuck that baby. I'm a racist. How the fuck you voting for Trump? He don't even like your ass. He don't even like your ass. He don't even like you. That's my free. He don't like you. He don't even like your dumb ass. You fucking stink. He don't even like you.
I've also done several videos on why seemingly normal things are now being labeled as far right, from working out to going to farmers markets to having children. The left wears its tolerance like a mask. It's not truly a part of them. What actually matters is loyalty to their politics. When the minority disagrees with the progressive politically, they become just as vicious as any KKK member. What's happening in all of these examples is the same thing as what's happening with the current left-wing disdain for rich men north of Richmond, as well as try that in a small town, and the Bud Light boycott and all the rest of it. The first level of understanding is that these are instances of rightist cultural victory, and the left doesn't want the right to win. In their minds, it's left good, right bad. Therefore, every left cultural victory is the good guys winning, and every right cultural victory is the bad guys winning. The second level is a Gramscian understanding of what's at play, that when a cultural event kicks off that captures the hearts and minds of the masses, if it embodies socialist politics, it can be used to inch us closer to revolution. If it embodies non-socialist politics, it serves to entrench the capitalist status quo. Therefore, the working class person who likes stuff like this is stifling the development of their own class consciousness. The third level is that right-wing populism is actually a lot like left-wing populism, so much so that people routinely cross over between them. Like I said, socialists talk about the ruling class of society who apparently oppress everybody, while shrieking Nazi whenever somebody who's not on the left tries to articulate the exact same idea. It's not enough that you notice that there's problems with the current system. You need to articulate that problem exactly as they do, and adopt their solutions, because every notion of political reform and revolution is highly dangerous, destabilizing, trust-eroding, except theirs, which is totally cool. But here's what's at the very bottom of it. Check out this Reddit post. Part of the reason I'm a socialist is that I'm not overly fond of reactionary poor people, and I'd like them to not exist. They often have bad beliefs, and a good way to break those beliefs and replace them with something more cosmopolitan is to force them to own a part of the means of production, destroying their culture by altering the conditions that allow it to exist. This is ultimately how parts of modern society we would consider to be good have come into being, and to shy from this is to reject what makes us human. Okay, this sounds really bad, right? Well, after I explain it in detail, it's going to sound a lot worse, so buckle up. For a Marxist, the materialist mode of analysis rules the day. It is the only way in which they see the world. If something happens, it has an economic reason for it to happen. One of the best examples of this is Marx's view on religion. To him, it simply serves to reinforce and justify the existence of capitalism. This is what he meant by religion is the opiate of the masses. It comforts you and keeps you delirious, so the bourgeois can keep exploiting you. But Marx was wrong. Religion has always been a justification for action in and of itself. The Christian Crusades, Islamic expansion. History is littered with examples of people making decisions for religious reasons, where the religion did not serve to simply post hoc justify some economic motive, but was in fact the primary motive. Feudal societies with agricultural-based modes of production have no economic incentive to venture into distant lands and convert the people there, but nonetheless our history is full of this happening. But this Reddit post is written through that false lens, the materialist mode of analysis. The bad beliefs he's talking about, he thinks exist due to the material conditions of what he calls the reactionary poor people. In other words, the culture, the practices, the beliefs of American rednecks only exists due to their poverty, their geographic location, and the fact that they're overwhelmingly either unemployed or blue-collar workers at a business they don't own. If their economic, employment, and geographic circumstances could be changed, the problematic redneck culture would cease to exist, according to this guy. His solution is to force them to own a part of the means of production. This is the whole worker co-op thing. Modern-day socialists are often market socialists, either as their ideal mode of politics or as a stepping stone towards communism. Market socialism posits that all businesses should be worker cooperatives, meaning owned in equal parts by all who work there. In other words, today if a shop owner hires 4 employees to work in his shop, that's 1 owner and 4 workers. In a market socialist system, the 5 people at the shop would all own an equal 20% of the business, regardless of who initially founded it. Yes, that's a bad idea, and no, I can't get into why right now. That video is somewhere on my list. But this Redditor's view is that working the means of production that you don't own is one factor that leads to the development of these problematic redneck cultures. And so, of course, the solution is to force workers to partially own the means of production that they work. Let me give you an example of what this guy is proposing. Let's say that you were working at a grocery store. You don't really like the job, but you need the money right now. You don't want to stay there long term, it's just something transitional, something to get you by for now because you have other plans coming down the pipe. Maybe you're moving in 6 months or going to school or whatever. Your game plan is to keep your head down, punch in, punch out, and maintain your life outside of work. The job is the least important thing going on right now. This Redditor would come along and say, okay, I don't like your culture and your way of life, so I'm going to force you to co-own part of the grocery store company. Now all of you workers will be co-managing the entire business. I theorize that this will radically change your culture and way of life to be more progressive and more like me. Now, I don't think that'll ever fucking work. In fact, if the job were actually transitory for you, as most part-time retail or food service jobs are, I feel like it would make you hate it even more than you already do. As there's no more of that keep your head down, punch in, punch out, move on shit, now part of your job is being actively involved in workplace politics. It's a dumb idea, but it stems from the theory that material conditions generate the culture that this guy hates, that smashing the culture is good, and so forcing new material conditions upon the blue-collar, redneck working class is also good. There's a book called The Theory of the Leisure Class by Thorstein Veblen. He's Norwegian, by the way, with a name like that. He was a critic of capitalism, but he wasn't a socialist or a fascist, despite what the name of that book might make you think. His idea was that the leisure class showed off its status by engaging in leisure, or by taking up employment in jobs of leisure, while the working class are the people who did productive work. In his view, productive work meant any labor that actually created something, whether that was food, or clothing, or buildings, any sort of stuff that can be built and used by people. Leisure work was work that didn't produce anything materially useful like that. So working in the church, or being an actor, or playing a sport professionally, or being a soldier. Leisure work doesn't mean that the work is easy, it's often quite hard. It simply refers to work that doesn't generate economic production. Veblen theorized that because it's often hard to deduce somebody's social status at a glance, especially in countries without a formal aristocratic class like the United States, status symbols are used to signal class. If you could afford to work leisure work, or better yet, own leisure works products, you were high class. Yeah, this seems obvious to us now in 2023. A Bugatti is a status symbol, we get it. But Veblen wrote this in 1899. He was the first to codify the idea. The upper class wears delicate, restrictive clothing, like suits or gowns, because they can afford to. It's not comfortable or durable, but that's okay. They can just buy more if they have to. The upper class engages in time-consuming, expensive sports because they can afford to. A sport like golf or fox hunting or whatever produces no actual economic utility. Only people with wealth have the time to learn something with no practical use. Having a wife who doesn't work, having servants, these are also signs of affluence. These are all things that poor people can't do, so doing them signals your status. And therefore rich people do them whether they like them or not. It's also why poor people who have a couple of steps ahead of the rest of the poors often try to chase the signals without actually gaining wealth. There's a biological basis for this too. The biologist Amos Sahavi proposed in a study that some animals evolved to display for potential mates specifically because these displays are costly to maintain. The obvious example is the peacock's tail. You'd think something like this would make it very easy for the peacock to be spotted by a predator. Therefore, only a healthy, fit bird is capable of growing such a tail while still evading predators. Many animal mating rituals involve the pointless expenditure of energy and resources, likely to signal to potential mates that they have excess to spare for them and their offspring. This probably also applies to humans as well, why men feel like they have to show off for women they're interested in. I also can't help but wonder if this tendency also partially contributes to the upper class's copious use of drugs and alcohol, like they're subconsciously trying to signal that they're so fit they can inject battery acid into their veins and keep on going or something like that. Of course, there's also limits to Veblen's theory. Do I play video games as a status symbol to hold myself above people who can't afford video games? Or do I just like to do it? Do the consumers with rooms full of Funko Pops or whatever spend all that money as a status symbol? Or do they genuinely like those properties? Do I listen to my chiptune and electro swing music to show off obscure bands like a hipster? Or do I do it because I like the music? I can see how the absurdity of Sam Smith-esque runway model outfits fits into Veblen's idea, but I cannot for the life of me envision anybody who would actually enjoy wearing that sort of thing. At some point, genuine enjoyment has to play a part in consumption. It can't all be social signaling. My view of Veblen's theory is that the 21st century has brought with it a new set of leisure status symbols. Now we have leisure political beliefs. It's very easy to soy out on Twitter about how human lives are always more important than property, and therefore you're not allowed any kind of home defense, when it's not their house being broken into. Or Vosh or Hassan speaking from their gated communities about the upcoming revolution, that they themselves will never partake in, or suffer the effects of should it happen. Do you think your average blue-collar redneck knows what the fuck heteronormative means? Or cultural appropriation, or cisgender, or intersectionality? The smarter among them will probably intuit it out, but most of them just don't have the education to get it. Progressivism has become a status symbol, the leisure political beliefs you can espouse to signal that you belong to the upper class. A poor kid who takes on a ton of student debt to get an arts degree that allows them to spout the latest progressive talking points with at least some familiarity is the equivalent of the ghetto guy who has child support to pay and is about to get evicted, but nonetheless spends the last of his cash on a big screen TV and a nice ride he can't afford. These are lower class people trying to signal that they are on a higher class than they actually are. The truly affluent will support causes like open borders or Antifa riots or the decriminalization of hard drugs or ethical non-monogamy because it advances their social standing while not actually costing them anything because they don't have to live with the real-world material effects of these policies. They're never going to live in an area with a bunch of illegal immigrants. Their neighborhood's never going to get burned down by a BLM march. The few times this actually happens, by the way, you can see their attitude take a full 180 real fucking quick. They don't have to walk by hordes of zombie-like homeless people with needles sticking out of their arms. They don't gotta juggle 5 different kids by 5 different fathers because they were told they can have it all as a strong, modern, empowered woman. Even when the upper class does engage in things like drug use or orgies or whatever, they have better healthcare and better education to manage its effects. Degeneracy has become a status symbol because engaging in it will destroy the lives of the plebs, while the upper class has the resources to hold it together. The reason this happened, that we shifted from luxury goods to luxury beliefs as status symbols, is because liberal capitalism is so kick-ass that we solved a lot of our material problems. Things like big TVs or computers or nice clothes, they're actually way more affordable now than they were decades ago. When I was a kid, that one guy who had the big TV in town, he was the rich family. Those things would run you 5 figures. Now everyone's got like a 50-incher or some shit. You can pick them up for a few $100s. So nowadays, it's beliefs that are the status symbol. If you can advocate for policy that appears to be moral by progressive standards, but live isolated from its material effects, you are signaling your upper class status. And as these beliefs become normalized at the top, they trickle down to the bottom, becoming the dominant culture. But the people at the bottom can't afford to weather their negative effects. Virtue signaling is therefore class signaling. Going all the way back to that Reddit post, you can now understand what's going on here. This guy is openly admitting that he wants the culture and economy to change to be in line with his morality. He knows this will destroy the working class, and he views this as a good thing because the culture and morality of the working class is something he considers evil. This is a way for him to signal not only his virtue, but his class status within his tribe. History is filled with examples of the upper class hating the lower class. Progressivism is just a new example in a long line of examples. And now we finally emerge back at our friend singing about the rich men north of Richmond. It was never about class struggle or class solidarity for the socialists. If it was, they would have forgiven him his minor trespasses of not fully understanding the relationship between the bourgeois and the proletariat from a socialist perspective, and instead relying on his intuition that something about his world is wrong, on account of him being uneducated. Hating him is simply a way for them to signal their virtue, their class, their in-group status to other socialists. Anyway, to wrap up his tale, the Progs dox the singer of the song. They revealed he's not actually a farmer working class hero, guys. He works sales at a construction company and owns $100,000 of land. So the whole thing's a lie! He responded on Facebook, pointing out that he dropped out of high school to get a job. He's worked in multiple plants and paper mills in North Carolina until he injured himself, and he then transitioned to a desk job in construction. He still owes $60,000 in the land that he lives on in his camper. So yeah, the left hates this guy. But meanwhile, the extreme right also decided to hate him too, because he gave this interview.
I mean, we are the melting pot of the world, and that's what makes us strong is our diversity, and we need to learn to harness that and appreciate it and not use it as a political tool to keep everyone separate from each other, you know?
For a long time, conservatives have been trying to ditch that racist label, saying that they're cool with everyone as long as they behave in a decent manner and don't force themselves on anyone else. This is the mainstream American right mindset, the libertarian leave me alone ethic. Rather than the left's insistence on keeping cultures separate through denouncing cultural appropriation or demanding that non-white people get special treatment for their cultural practices, this guy believes that anybody can come to America and be American as long as they adhere to American values, which is what he's referring to with the phrase melting pot. I know that's not exactly what melting pot means in a sociological sense, but you can tell by the context that's what he's saying. Again, he's not educated. But there are actually radical rightoids right now abandoning him for this, saying that he's sold out or he's a fed because he's not overtly racist or something. Anyway, this cycle will happen anytime something goes viral on the right. The left will denounce it because they're supposed to be the arbiters of popular culture. They will view it as a step backwards because their politics aren't being privileged. And they will say this regardless of the consequences of their own beliefs because they don't need to be worried about those consequences. The people who made it go viral in the first place, the blue-collar workers, the rednecks, the lower class, it's their job to pay the tab on the progressive beliefs of the upper class as a part of the grand society-wide struggle session against them.